Sonia Arrison, writer and futurist and author of 100 Plus, a very interesting new book about a huge revolution in healthcare. Sonia, thanks so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Thanks, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Sonia, in your book, you've laid out this completely this radically new world of healthcare um, in which we will serve our own medical parts and we will double our life expectancy in the 21st century. What I'd like you to talk about now is the economic opportunities, what that will mean, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs who believe, I think, watching this show, that healthcare is the next horizon. And I'm very interested in where you see the real economic opportunities, the entrepreneurial opportunities in this new world that you lay out.
Well, there's certainly a lot of opportunities in healthcare right now. But if you take a longer view and look at a world where we're living to 150 years in a healthy state, so people are healthy, chronic disease gets pushed out and comes on later and later in life. What that means is there's entirely new market segments that didn't exist before. There's older people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100 who are still healthy and energetic and want to do things. And maybe they're even still working. Because remember, I mean, if we can live to 150 in a healthy state, you're not going to be retiring at 65. So that changes things. That changes the workforce. It changes workforce issues. It changes education. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in the education space because when you're alive and healthy for that long, you may not want to be in the same career the entire time. You might get bored. I mean, maybe you'll want to be a doctor for part of your life. Maybe you'll want to be a lawyer for part of your life and an entrepreneur for part of your life. And you'll have to go back and retrain. And so we may redefine what retirement means. Retirement may come to not mean this large chunk of time at the end of your life where you go golfing and what have you. It may come to mean a large chunk of time that you take off at different times during your life so that you can retrain for a brand new career and then go back to work.
I know you've served, for example, on the Congressional Advisory Commission on Electronic Commerce and the Californian Commission on Internet Political Practices. How central is the internet in this new world?
Oh, I think it's key in our world for all sorts of reasons.
Well, in terms of this new world of healthcare where we double our life expectancy, what will be the role of the internet in shaping this ecosystem?
Well, I think that right now you can see that there's a burgeoning market in terms of reporting devices that wearable devices that measure heart rate and blood pressure and all these sorts of things. And I'm sure that market will continue to grow. And the internet's important in that, of course, because then you can upload data wirelessly and easily, which makes it more convenient.
Will the internet become a network for sharing, I don't know, healthcare devices and certainly information and knowledge? Will it make it affordable? I know that Jeremy Rifkin is just coming out with a new book. He'll be on the show in the next month on the third industrial revolution. And I see the revolution you're describing as being central to this third industrial revolution. He makes energy central, but I think healthcare will be equally central.
Right, and and nanotechnology, I think, will be part of the next revolution as well. And the ability, and the internet will be important in terms of the ability to download blueprints for 3D printing of things that we might use in healthcare, as well as other consumer goods. So, and communication, of course, with your doctor and with communities. Maybe if you're involved in citizen science already, people are using the internet to share their genomic data. And so there's so many different ways that the internet is and will be involved in the future in healthcare and new economies going forward.
3D printing is becoming increasingly hot. The Wired editor-in-chief, Chris Anderson, I think, is writing a book about it. What will be the role of 3D printing in this healthcare revolution? Will we be able to literally print our own body parts?
That's a good question, because right now, of course, 3D printing of organs does already exist. I was holding a 3D printed human blood vessel in my hand just a few months ago. Organovo, a company that does it, was demoing it, and it's just really quite fascinating. I mean, what they do is they, instead of putting ink in the printer, they put cells, and instead of paper, they have a biodegradable scaffold. And they put the cells one on top of each other, and eventually it forms a biological structure. And so, yes, you actually could imagine a future in which you print your own organs at home. That would, of course, be assuming the FDA would let you, and all the government controls approved it. But in theory, it's definitely possible.
It might have some rather crude repercussions, I would guess, if we could each print our own body parts, right?
Right. Well, then you would have to know what to do with them, of course. And I don't think anybody's going to be installing their own blood vessels anytime soon.
What about the downside, though? What are the problems of this? Two occur to me. The first is privacy. You already see with the genomic issue, networks like 23andMe, in which some people argue we're going to be revealing our DNA to the network, which will certainly undermine questions of privacy. And the second, of course, is overpopulation. I mean, if everyone can live to 150, we already have a severely overpopulated world. What impact will this have on the environment?
Right. Those are two very good questions. On the privacy issue, I think that's something that's going to, it's already a worry, and it's something that's going to continue to be a worry, and I think we're going to have to track that really closely.
Do you think there may be a need, given the radical changes here, could there be a need for significant new legislation to protect individual privacy in this new world?
Well, I think the government is always trying to keep up with technology. I mean, it's always something new comes along, and the old rules don't quite fit it. And I think in that context, new legislation will be required, because it'll be catching up with the reality of genomic privacy and other things going forward. On the environmental question.
Yeah, because that clearly is a significant issue.
Yes, very important and legitimate issue. In fact, I have an entire chapter on the environment and population in my book. And it is a worry. It turns out it's not as bad as you would think on first glance. And the reason for that is that world population growth rates have actually been declining quite dramatically over the last little while. And so if you look, I have a chart in the book, you can look at the chart, it's going straight down like that. And the UN predicts that fertility rates will be under 2.1 by 2050, which is less than replacement value. So world population is actually predicted to decline at some point. Now, that could change, of course, because if we're living longer and healthier, there'll be more people around, of course, because they won't be dying at as fast a rate as they're dying now. But if you talk to demographers, what they'll tell you is that really heavy population growth really comes from births, not from fewer deaths. And that's because when you have births, you can have multiple births. And when one person doesn't die, it's only one person. And so there were some demographers at the University of Chicago who did a simulation and looked at the population of Sweden, because Sweden is one of those countries that is always a good test case because they have good records. And they said, okay, well, what would happen if the entire population of Sweden were to become immortal tomorrow? And so this isn't living to 150. This is immortal, like never dying, right? What would happen to the population? And I would have thought that the population would completely explode. And using modeling that the World Bank uses, the UN uses, the figure that they came up with was that the population of Sweden would only grow by 22% over 100 years, which isn't nearly as much as you think it would grow. So I think the answer to the population question is that population, yes, it will grow if people are not dying quite as quickly as they would normally die. But it's not going to grow exponentially, and it's not going to grow as as much as we would assume it would grow. And so that's at least something to mitigate that fear. And then on the other side is the resource issue, which I think is related to it in terms of, if we have more people, how do we provide for them, right? I mean, all the food and the water and all the different resources that humans consume. And I answer that question in the book as well. And the quick summary of it is that fear is based on sort of the Malthusian idea that people just keep consuming and eventually we'll just run out of everything. And the thing that's wrong with that assumption, the reason why Malthus was wrong, is that he forgot about a resource, and that resource is human capital. And human capital is important because humans come up with ideas and they innovate and they come up with different ways to provide resources. And because of that, more humans usually actually means more innovations. And that's why we don't run out of things as population grows.
Finally, Sonia, this has been a fascinating interview. We're obviously at the very early stages of this revolution. Where are, in very concrete terms, the entrepreneurial opportunities? What areas are literally changing now where people might get involved in a startup or think about becoming pioneers of this new medicine?
I think there's two areas that are super important right now. One, of course, is in the bioengineering itself, in the do-it-yourself biospace, in the self-measurement space, in the genomic space. And I think a lot of folks in Silicon Valley in the tech community have already identified that. The second area, I would say, is in education, because as people live longer, and we're already living longer, they're going to need to retrain. And of course, we have all these different tools of virtual reality that's coming along that's going to make education even more exciting. The internet, of course, the Khan Academy, all those types of things. And I think that's another area that entrepreneurs have already identified, but I think it's definitely going to grow and get bigger.
Sonia Arrison, the author of 100 Plus, I want to thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV. This is a great subject, and I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thanks, Andrew.
I mean, we've got 100 more years, right? So we can do this many more times.
I'll be back.